Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh. This creation is a great mystery. Man is a great mystery. God is a great mystery. Our birth is a great mystery. All of creation is a mystery. How do we realize who we are, who our God is, how this creation has occurred? Man has used religion and prayer for years and years and years to try to understand the power that is God. There's the Bible, there's the Quran, there are the Hindu epics. There are so many scriptures. How many of them have taken people so that they can see God? How many of them have introduced people to God? Moses on Mount Sinai was given the 10 Commandments. Did Moses see God? What Moses saw was an effulgent light. And from that effulgent light, the power of God came as a voice and gave him the commandments. Muhammad went on the mirage. He went to find God. And when he got to that place, there was a veil that separated him. And a voice came through the veil, and that's how he communicated. But then Muhammad said, is it possible that I could see your form? And a crystal mirror appeared. And Muhammad looked into that crystal mirror, and he saw himself as a 16-year-old youth. When man presents himself to God, he is shown himself. That becomes the image that man sees. So like that, the prophets came. The prophets communicated with God. The prophets were given words from God, and they communicated through that sound in the same way that Moses communicated. And that sound came to them and gave them instruction. And they took that instruction and they gave it to mankind. They gave to man what God gave to them. In this creation, God has created so many different things. He's created the creatures. He's created the seas. He's created the lives within the seas. He's created the lives on the earth. And for each of them, he's given their appropriate foods. No one has told these animals or shown these animals what it is they can eat and what it is they can't eat. Yet somehow they know what food is appropriate for them and what food is not appropriate for them. They understand what they can eat and what is poisonous. Man has to find out for himself what is appropriate and what is poisonous. Man looks to astrologers to tell him about himself. But if you look at this astrology, what's it made up of? It's made up of beasts. There are bulls, and there are scorpions, and there are lions, and there are fish. But are there any true men there? There aren't. So Astrology is not for man. God is for man, and man must realize this. Man must give up trying to understand his future through this astrology. He has to understand his future through Allah. He has to understand his future through God. We have to find a way to find our Creator. Man has been given wisdom, which is a consciousness much higher than anything that's been given to the animals. And we have to use this wisdom to find Allah. Take a stringed instrument. If you pluck that instrument, if you pluck that string correctly, a note comes from that string. A note comes out of it. Where did that note come from? Where did that sound come from? And how does man understand that note? Now, one who's studied these instruments and knows how to make the various notes will eventually understand how to make music out of these notes. But it takes time and it takes study. We have an instrument within ourselves. We have an instrument within the core of our being, and we must learn how to play this instrument. God is within us, and God is within that instrument that is in us. We must find the original note of creation. We must find the origin of sound, the origin of what brought us into this place. And what is that sound? Where did that sound come from? There are, in a day, approximately 42,000 breaths in and out, 21,000 in and 21,000 out. With those breaths, we have to intone that particular note. And what is that note? That note is, He exists, I do not. He exists, I do not. God has everything. He doesn't need anything from us. He doesn't need incense. He doesn't need gold. He doesn't need jewelry. He doesn't need food. He doesn't need flowers. There's nothing that we can give him except he exists and I do not. This is at the origin of things. This is at the moment of creation. He is within all of creation. Our assumptions that we exist separate from that is the illusion that takes us in the wrong way. Man is clouded from his truth. The clouding begins with the body. The body covers the soul, and the soul is our truth. But man does more to cloud himself. The swamis, the gurus, they dress themselves in robes, in saffron robes, in red robes, in white robes, further separating themselves from God. We need not to separate ourselves from God. We need to draw closer to God. And there is only one true method for this. There is only one true way for this. It's not going to be found in books. It's not going to be found in recitations. It's not going to be found in churches. It's not going to be found under trees. It's not going to be found by standing on your head with your legs up in the air. It's not going to be found in any of these ways. It's going to be found by finding that original note, that original resonance inside of yourself that says, not I, only he. Not I, only he. La ilaha illallah. La ilaha illallah. But instead of going towards that note, man goes to the things that are around him. Man tries to create a relationship with God through the things around him. So he wears robes, thinking that will somehow make him more pure. He grows his hair, thinking that will make him more pure. Or he shaves his hair, thinking that will make him more pure. Man takes form and tries to use form to connect to the formless, to commune with the formless. Form will not be able to commune with the formless. God is within you, and you will find him through finding that place within you that he resonates. And to find that place that he resonates, to establish a communion with him, you have to repeat that eternal note. And what is that eternal note? Not I, just he. Not I, just he. If we become arrogant, if we think we are the greatest, he will be greater than any greatness we can imagine. If we think we are a king, he will be a greater king than any of us can imagine. The higher we think of ourselves, the higher he will be towards us. But if we become small, if we become a slave to him, then he becomes smaller. He becomes a slave to us. So we have to understand this dynamic. We create our relationship with Allah, and the only true relationship that can be created with him is through surrender, through becoming small, so that he can come beneath us and raise us up. And we become small through intoning that note, through expressing the non-existence of the I and the reality that God alone is. This is the method to make a connection with the Godhead. This is the method to make a connection with the Lord. And this is the only true method that exists. Recitations aren't going to get you there. Books aren't going to get you there. Different kinds of rituals aren't going to get you there. Burning incense isn't going to get you there. Making donations isn't what's going to get you there. What's going to get you there is the constant recitation of only he exists, I do not. Only he exists, I do not. This understanding has to become constant in our lives. It must be repeated over and over and over. We have approximately 42,000 breaths a day, and it must be done with each and every one of those breaths. This seems like a difficult task, but in truth, it's like drawing water from a well. After you pump long enough, the water flows. So after you recite this long enough, it becomes automatic within you. We have blood within us. The blood runs through our entire body. It does this automatically. We don't think about it. We don't direct it. It just happens. The breath, when we take the breath in, runs throughout our entire body. It runs through every portion of us. So when we do this, he alone exists, I do not, through our breath, it runs through our entire body, and it touches each portion of us, each section of us, each cell of us. And then each cell resonates with that one note that is the note of reality, with that one note that is the original note from creation, with that one resonance, which is the original resonance of creation. He alone exists. I do not. No one is asking anyone to give up their jobs. No one is asking anyone to run from their duties or to run away from their home. God does his duties. We have to do our duties. You don't need to wear robes. You don't need to cut your hair. You don't need to read books. You don't have to be involved in rituals. You have to be involved in understanding that one note, that truth that exists within us, that truth that the wise men know and that the wise men have told us about and explained to us as the methodology for reaching God. The mystery is great, and the mystery cannot be found by running around the world and looking for answers. We don't need to go anywhere. We can just sit in the place that we are, because Allah is everywhere. It isn't as if you have to go to a specific place to find him. He's already here with us. He's already here within us. He is closer to us than our own jugular vein. And we must understand that closeness. We must understand that he is right here, and he is waiting for us to meet him. He is waiting for us to commune with him. And the instruction on how to commune with him has been given to us by the ones who understand that communion. And this instruction is given through nearness, through the ones who already know it. It's not given through books, it's given through that connection. Now, in addition to being able to recite that one note, in addition to being able to reiterate constantly, only he exists, I do not, we must take on his 99 qualities and his 3,000 gracious attributes. We must understand patience. We must understand tolerance. We must understand justice. We must understand unity. We can't recite that note of he alone exists, we do not, as long as we are trapped within illusion, as long as we don't understand the unity of all existence, as long as we have separations and differences. What do we know about Allah? What do we know about God? Does God have a wife and children? Does God have differences? Does God have a religion? Does God have a specific way of worshiping? Or is God all-encompassing? Is God everywhere? Is God inside and outside? Is God wherever we look? We have to begin to understand all these things. And as we understand them, we become more and more pure. We give up our differences. We give up our separations. We are all souls within a body. We are not bodies with a soul. We are souls with a body. Now, because of the elemental differences within our bodies, the senses perceive differences. The senses perceive separation. The senses perceive colors. So since the senses perceive colors, they separate men into colors and say these men are different than those men because of their color. These are false distinctions. And it is only when we understand all of the false distinctions can we understand unity. There is a story in the Bible of the Tower of Babel. Men were trying to build a tower to reach God. And they kept going higher and higher and higher. And finally, God gave them all different languages, and they could no longer communicate. Because they could no longer communicate, they could no longer build. So through giving them different languages, he did away with this false idea that you could build a stairway to heaven or a temple to reach heaven. But it also created differences. And then these differences, as opposed to being able to see through them and being able to tell that these were false distinctions, man gave them credence. Man gave them weight, and man began to separate from each other. And this is the story of mankind. The prophets came. The prophets came with the message of the unity of existence, and each group that the prophets came to made a religion out of their prophet, as opposed to seeing the unity of all the prophets. They separated the prophets and began to preach that there were differences between them. And depending on which ones you followed, that made you either part of the most important group or not. And all religions began the fiction that they are the most important religion, that they are the only religion. And then finally, they are the only way. And you must follow the precepts of that religion in order to be able to find truth, in order to be able to find reality, in order to be able to find your way to your Lord. But in truth, these distinctions and the making of these distinctions and the separations created by these distinctions took people further from their Lord than closer to them. God has no distinctions. God has no form. God has no husband and wife. So God has no familial attachments. Yet all of us have familial attachments, and we hold these familial attachments more important than our attachments to the rest of humanity. Again, these are false distinctions. If we look at the nature of God and apply that nature towards ourself and understand from that nature who we are, we can more fully understand the true nature of ourselves. And the true nature of ourselves, after you take away these artificial distinctions, like the body, like the color, like the nationality, like the language, like the religion, like the rituals, like the family. We begin to understand the unity that exists between ourselves and everyone else. Someone once asked my teacher, how do I see the way that you see through your eyes? And he said, when your eye no longer sees yourself as separate, then your eyes can see like my eyes see. Even though he didn't speak English, he was able to pun in English. When the eye no longer sees separations, then the eye can see the way my eye sees. The teacher saw no separations. He saw no distinctions. An interesting thing happened to me the first time I met him. He was from Sri Lanka, and his complexion was very dark. And he spoke a language entirely different than mine, one I'd never heard before, one I'd never even heard of before. And he spoke through a translator. And the moment I sat in front of him, I felt the connection between him and myself. All of these artificial distinctions disappeared in an instant because of the overwhelming love that poured forth from him, the overwhelming grace that poured forth from him, and the reality that existed within that body that was so powerful that you could feel it in front of you, that its resonance broke through every barrier, every mind trick, every preconception that you had. We need to break through all of those barriers. We need to break through all of our preconceptions. We need to understand truth, not what we have learned on our way through this journey of our life. One of the things I realized is that men will give you answers to questions they don't know the answers to. And they have no shame in doing this because that's what they've been taught. So they assume what they have been taught is accurate, but it isn't accurate. So what happens is, as we go through life, we get filled with lies, and we believe these lies, and these lies become deeply hidden within us, and we have trouble finding them. What's written on us when we're children is written like writing on stone, which means that to change that, we have to work very hard. So we have to change all of that which we've been taught through our culture, all that we have been taught through our religion, everything that we've been taught about differences and superiority and the egocentric nature of our group and the importance of our group as opposed to every other group has to be torn away. As long as we label ourselves with worldly labels, as long as we recognize ourselves as worldly labels, we are identifying ourselves inappropriately. We are identifying ourselves in a way that isn't real. So if we call ourselves a lawyer or a doctor or an engineer or a teacher, we've labeled ourselves, and these labels have no meaning. As long as we give ourselves a religion, this religion has no meaning. We can call ourselves believers, but if we go beyond that, We are putting ourselves in a separate group. By the way, the word Muslim in Arabic just means believer, but it's taken on entirely different meanings. We have to rid ourselves of all of the conventions of this illusory world. We have to rid ourselves of all of the idiosyncrasies of this illusionary world. We have to rid ourselves of all of the differences within this illusory world. We have to give them up. And we have to understand the unity of existence. And then we have to give up our mind and our desire. We have to become small and smaller and smaller and smaller. And we have to repeat the one note that will bring us to true communion, that one note that will resonate in reality and resonate with our Lord. I do not exist, only He exists. I do not exist, only He exists. He doesn't need anything from us. He doesn't need our gold or our silver. He doesn't need anything but the recognition of the truth. All that we can do is recognize the truth. And what is the truth? The truth is La ilaha illallah. Not I, only He. Not I, only He. All that we see is illusion. All that we encounter is illusion. All that we live with is illusion. And all of this will disappear. But we also have to know, what is it that disappears and what is it that remains? What is it that is temporary and what is it that's eternal? We have to recognize this and we have to pay obeisance to that which is eternal. We have to look at that portion of us that doesn't disappear, and we have to spend our time with that. And what does and how do we do that? By repeating, only He exists, not I. Only He exists, not I. There are no mantras that lead you to know God. There is only the recitation of La ilaha illallah. This is at the core of understanding. This is at the core of reality. This is at the core of what takes us into communion with our Lord. And this constant repetition will bring you to the truth. This constant repetition will bring you to know yourself and to know your Lord. This is the way. And this is what we've been taught by the ones who've experienced it. So we need to incorporate this into our lives, not for a moment, but throughout the day, throughout each moment, throughout each hour, throughout each breath. It must become our touchstone. It must become what it is we say and what it is we do. And through this, we will get to know our reality. We will get to know our truth. We will get to know where we came from and where we are going. And this immense mystery that is our birth, this immense mystery that is our life, this immense mystery that is creation and is the Lord, will be explained to us internally as we do this. We will come closer to the truth. We will come closer to reality. So we have to give up every other method that we know. We have to give up every other idea that we know. We have to take everything down to the bare bones of the truth. And the bare bones is one note, the repetition of one note, the repetition of, I do not exist, only He is. I do not exist, only he is. And this will give us the solution to all of our problems. This will give us the solution to all of our difficulties. This will give us the solution to all of our worries. This will take us into the effulgent light of the ecstasy and grace of our Lord. Imagine, if I do not exist, do my worries exist? If I do not exist, do my troubles exist? If I do not exist, do all of my headaches and difficulties exist? None of these things exist. They're all illusions, and we pay so much attention to them. We give them so much credence, and we give them so much time. Instead of giving time to these illusions, instead of giving time to these attachments, let's give time to the resonance of truth. And the resonance of truth is, I do not exist, only he exists. May this become easy for us. May we understand the truth of it. May it resonate within us over and over and over, and may it come to the point where we commune with our Lord, know the truth, know our Lord, know ourselves, know reality, and become amongst those who understand truth. May it be so for each and every one of us. Ameen, ameen. Ya Rabbil Alameen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.